Thanks for joining us for Season 5 of the Service to School Stories podcast. I'm Sydney Mathis, your host and Chief Program Officer at Service to School. This season, we wanted to highlight some of our incredible alumni and dive deeper into their stories. You'll hear from a variety of student veterans about their journey from the military through the admissions process and onto campus. Guests will share how they overcame challenges, and we'll look back on their journey to give some advice along the way. Let's kick it off. All right. For today's episode of the Service to School Stories podcast, we are joined by John Jasionowicz. John is the director of our Other Graduate team. He's been with Service to School here in a couple of roles. First as an ambassador supporting applicants. You have recently graduated from your MBA program at Vanderbilt. But the part of the conversation today that I'm really excited to chat with you about, John, is your now post-grad plans, but also your experience working with the Other Graduate team. So thank you so much for being here. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, definitely, and trying to align it with service school. Coming out, I was an engineering officer with the Army. I was at Fort Campbell with 101st. Had medical retirement, so kind of condensed my timeline. Was coming out, looking at programs, looked at Vanderbilt as one of them for MBA. Got involved with service school for some help for my applications, and then once I got in and wanted to give back, it was recommended by my mentor to volunteer. I served as ambassador, helped another actually Army engineer vet get into Columbia for his MBA, and then opportunity opened up with the other grad program. I was like, have a problem with saying yes and volunteering too much, and there's definitely been times where I'm like, why did I also volunteer for this? I have enough on my plate, but just hearing the gratitude from some of the applicants, it just aligns it every time that have guys, like I said, like E4 nuclear guy in a sub who's now doing a PhD in nuclear physics, trying to help him out. I barely know what some of that is, and veterans helping veterans.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been so integral to the Other Grad team. I know the impact that you all are having there, as kind of to your point, is just felt throughout the applicants. Can you talk with our listeners a little bit about your decision to go back to graduate school, and now that you've wrapped up your time at Vanderbilt, kind of what's next for you?
Yeah, definitely. So had no issues with being a engineer either on the Army side, Army Corps side, but I felt that I kind of outgrew, especially with my experience with being a combat engineering PL, with having XO, other wide variety of roles that the Army kind of just threw me in and had to figure it out. I didn't want to go start down at an entry level position again. And I saw a lot about MBA programs, and there was a lot of variety where you can also figure out what you want to do when you grow up. And definitely that helped me out because I want to do consulting. I had recruited with your big four, your BCGs, your bigger firms, but then through my MBA process, I ended up kind of doing my own consulting now where it's tech transfer, technology commercialization, which kind of leverages military side on some contracts, engineering side, and business side, which being at the MBA helped me figure all that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's next? You said you graduated in May, correct?
Yes.
So what's next for you?
Currently applying to management PhD programs, which is even we're getting smaller and smaller of the vet help. But there's still a couple of guys, even on my team, that I emailed them. They helped me out a lot. But basically, and the funny thing is my work, the research work, aligns with veteran employment. So I don't know, everything comes full circle when you truly find out your purpose after the military, which is a challenge when you're first coming out.
Yeah. So you talked about that being a really small population. I think a lot of people don't realize that here at Services School, we do undergraduate, law school, MBA school, healthcare support, but also this other grad team that is made up of kind of those one-off degrees, right? Like I'm sure you all see a lot of masters in computer science, a lot of masters in engineering students come through, but the students that are coming through for PhDs is significantly smaller to the point that you just made. Um, So, what is that process like, and how is it different from like applying to a MBA or a law school program?
I would say the big difference is not to say it's like the Wild West, but it's aligned with that small amount of vets. You have say you're applying to a management program, say it's Vanderbilt isn't taking PhDs in that, they have postgrads, but say, I don't know, so UPenn, Wharton, they're for an operations department, they're probably bringing on maybe 2 to 3 candidates. So it's very competitive, like very kind of combined, like a triangle, and it's very tailored process where like it's a mentorship type, like you're gonna be working with a professor directly as your dissertation advisor. So very tailored, and even if I apply for a major for a PhD, it dependent on, oh, I want to work with this professor. Maybe I want to be at this school for family reasons or other reasons. And then I want to do this type of research that either this school has resources or this professor is very well renowned. So it's at the MBA, it's like, hey, kind of almost like interview side, like selling your qualifications, and then can kind of figure things out, I guess, once there's a little bit more guardrails, I guess.
hmm And what is your hope and intended, I would say, career outcome once you earn a PhD?
I mean, definitely I'm targeting top programs because I would like to be on the professor side, which is, if you asked me pre-army or before, I would have been like, what are you talking about? But I mean, really, it comes from the aspect of there not being a ton of PhDs who are vets, especially teaching at that level. And like I said, my research is aligned with veteran recruitment, and I got pulled into that because, or yeah, veteran workforce. I got pulled into that because I had a professor that was like, John, there's barely anything on this. Like, would you consider submitting a proposal to journal management? And I was like, yeah, sure. Because like I said, I'd volunteer for too many things. But I mean, it's something where I think it's important, not even just to other vets, but I've said it as there's whatever, a smaller population of veterans, but a lot of people have family members or grandparents or etc. who are veterans that they respect or value, or maybe a direct family member, maybe their brother, maybe fiance, etc. Like there's usually some form of connection where maybe someone wasn't a veteran, but they still want to help the community. And I remember first getting involved with PhDs on the service school side. I'm like, oh, I didn't know we had a vet in this program. It's because we didn't. It's because he was helping out veterans, but he was coming from the civilian side.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the research topic. How important do you feel it is for individuals that are considering a PhD to kind of already have that research topic or direction of dissertation kind of already nailed down?
I mean, yeah, like that's really the most important part. And like I said, I reached out to one of our other grad ambassadors, like I said, one of our few PhD ambassadors. And even for my statement of purpose, which is similar to an MBA, you have to argue like, yeah, I want MBA for this reason. But for the PhD, you're like arguing the school that I like the culture. I want to work with this professor. He's done research in this area. I want to do this research and this pathway I want to teach. Like there's so many levels to it. It's the way I've thought of the process. Like it's years as long as things keep going well. But like even the veteran progress for publication wise, like it's gonna take some time because you have to build papers and work through all that. But yeah, it's definitely important to have that research topic. That's the first thing I ask because you're applying to a major, but the major like itself, it's not like an undergrad major. It's not even like a master MBA where I specialize in certain areas, or MS that's in a certain area. Like you want to find an area that helps you or aligns, but really you're building your education from your research and your career path based on classes, people you work with, etc.
One thing you talked about a little bit there is kind of the longevity of the program, right? So a PhD isn't something that it sounds like someone would just dive into to give it a try, right? Like, I feel like we hear that a lot on the undergraduate side where our students are like, well, what if I'm unsure of my major? Or is it okay to change my mind, right? By the time you get to applying to PhD programs, ideally, this isn't necessarily something that you're just going to dip your toe in and then maybe change your mind. I do think that there's a world where it takes someone maybe a little bit longer to finish their PhD program or to complete that dissertation. But to your point of having that statement of purpose, it's really important to kind of have that hashed out before you really kind of go all in on a PhD.
Yeah, because you have to hash it out to like really have your motivation because I mean, even for me, like I'm not directly, but taking a pay cut with other roles I could have went with out of top 25 MBA. Like if I want to go work with whoever, like I said, your BCGs or Goldmans or whoever, but I just kind of found that that wasn't the work for me, and I liked how business worked. And really, my professor I work with on this is it's that service aspect that got me into the military, that got me with service school. And it, as much as I want to be like, oh, I'll go work with this bank and make a ton of money, but the true calling was always service, and you can't really get away from that. So it's yeah, it's going to be a long time. I'm lucky because have good benefits. So for 5 years in a program, but yeah, it's a grind. I think there are definitely some veterans like on I know the Army side get pulled into the cool guy awards and the badges and everything, and they kind of pin a PhD as that, but it's just that there's I guess even before I go on some tangent, but big difference between like MBA work and then doing the research work is the research work like it's not like I'm making it up or I have to support what I'm trying to say. Like I remember my one co-author, my one professor helping me. She's been doing research maybe 20, 30 years. And I was like, hey, yeah, do you have an example of this? Like we're working on like a key skills mapping of like an MOS to civilian careers or role or attributes they might need. And I'm like, yeah, do you have an example of this? And she was like, no, because it hasn't been done before. I was like, all right, guess I'll go figure it out. And yeah, I'm pretty tied to it now where I've had whoever try to talk me out of it, and either I'm just very stubborn or etc.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the weeds, you're kind of immersed in that work now. You talked about benefits. So I know that at Vanderbilt you were one of their Bass Military Scholars, which helps fund some of your education there. But can you help our listeners who might be thinking a PhD is either, their next step or something long term that they're considering? How should they be thinking about financing, funding, or how do benefits cover that?
So I guess PhD wise, that's why you're only having maybe like one to two, three candidates, like is because the school is basically self-funding you, like they're paying for that education, and then you're getting a stipend, a pay from them, but it's not a lot. But then I have VA retirement, so for disability pay, so roll that together with that pay, then I can at least live off of it. And yeah, with the Bass program, because I spoke with General Brower about this just so I wouldn't misspeak on anything, but for that, it's not even meant to it's not to replace a GI Bill or Voc Rehab, which I used for my MBA, and I've recommended Voc Rehab VRNE because it was very underutilized, probably still is. But the Bass program, the focus is the service aspect and kind of closing the civilian military divide. But it's a service free stipend, so it's supposed to be added on to like, oh, I have yellow ribbon benefits paying for school. It's not supposed to replace that. It's supposed to be like, say, I'm a veteran, I might be later in my career when I'm going back to a master's. I might have a whole family, a mortgage, all this stuff. Like it helps bridge the gap that would be a challenge when even considering a program where it might be like, hey, if I don't have enough to cover all this, I'm not going.
Right. And are you all on the other grad team? Are you all seeing more applicants come to you all with questions about voc rehab?
Uh, I have had benefit questions. Usually it's more so about timeline, and it's always like it always defaults back to GI Bill. It's like, oh, GI, and like I try and throw it in there. Big difference is Voc Rehab's not an education program, but if you align it with like, hey, I have one classmate from Bass Scholars who was at Vanderbilt Law School. He was a Marine infantry guy. And it's like, if you're like, hey, I did X amount of years Marine infantry, now I want to be a lawyer in this area of legal defense, then it's like, hey, I kind of need some help here to kind of bridge the gap. Because not that you're definitely not behind on the actual skills, or not to say actual skills, but the intangibles. But really, you have to catch up with learning the language, either civilian side or at the school or that uh, profession as well. And yeah, and voc rehab. Even when I was done, I have a role now where, like I said, I do my own work, but consulting work is kind of up and down. I've done some other work helping with Metro Nashville, and it was from that program where I got connected with job counselors for the VA and then for the state as well. And I mean, the role's great. I would have never found it if it wasn't for all that support after I finished the degree.
So voc rehab will, and I guess you don't necessarily need it for a PhD, but you've kind of already used that benefit to its full like ability, or could you potentially use it to continue graduate work?
So I guess for me, like when I was coming out I had medical retirement. With the timing of my retirement, I was kind of like, and my commander was on the same page, because I was moved to a medical unit. And I was like, hey, if my med board gets delayed, would you support me like doing classes and stuff? He's like, yeah, sure. Like, as long as you get all this like other stuff done. And the timing of timing of how it was, really you should be using Voc Rehab. If you have full GI Bill, you should be using Voc Rehab first, and then you will still get a BAH if you have 100% GI Bill, and then can also use those benefits after the fact. Mine was kind of convoluted to say the least, but I guess got banged up pretty bad, so my disability pay kind of took the area of what would have been more GI Bill, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, we are seeing a big increase on the undergraduate side of students coming in and with questions about voc rehab. So I've always been curious to know, like, how far could they take that, right? Like, if they were saying, okay, I'm coming in and now I want to go to medical school, could they take voc rehab all the way through bachelor's degree and medical school? Or if they were going like a doctoral degree versus a funded PhD route, like, could that take them all the way through that? So that's kind of the context that I was looking to, be able to provide listeners. So if they were thinking like that long-term road is in front of them, how could they set themselves up financially to potentially have it all covered?
Yeah, I think definitely in that sort of environment, that's uh why there were not issues, but why the timing of my GI Bill was kind of off, because I had done ROTC and that had paid for my undergrad. So then paying that back and then the timing of all that was why I was like, okay, I'll use Voc Rehab as a backup, which I was told, oh, like they're not gonna pay for Vanderbilt. And then I get to the program, I have a classmate who was using it, and he's like, yeah, do you want my high cost memo that I submitted? So I guess the first step, and even I've put it on sit reps to steer codes. I put it on other pay. Like it's I never was looking to be the Voc Rehab guy, but I have been in some situations where some veterans are like, "What even is that?" And like I said, the thing that blew my mind in the first place was I was in a conference and like your like a HBS or UPenn, like it would a GI Bill would have like a little bit it wouldn't cover with the cost, but if you have voc rehab for those programs, it covers the whole thing, and also covered for parking pass for me. It covered basically anything you need. Or yeah, I got, like I said, that laptop that has been good for most of the part that's newer. I got that laptop from Voc Rehab, and they gave me that. They gave me a printer, gave me a second monitor, and this is when
Wow.
I didn't really have things set up in my newer place, so it was definitely useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to your point, it's an underutilized resource. A lot of people don't know about it. And I think a lot of people just have kind of individual questions about how it works for them. Especially, it's interesting that you mentioned a buddy that had to, write a letter for the high cost appeal. We've had several students kind of navigate that as well. So it really just feels like, with most things, it kind of depends on who you talk to and who your voc rehab counselor is and kind of what they are willing to work with you on.
Yeah, that was the big part for me was I had a very good voc rehab counselor that helped me out a lot as well. And like I said, I found those other vets that helped me along the way. So now I've been trying to pay that forward as well because yeah, it was even I was working with very good transition resources coming out of the army, and like I said, they were like, oh, they won't. It's like maybe look at a state school, like maybe they'll cover that. Like they won't cover Vanderbilt, and then it was not to say it was the easy process, but did all the right paperwork and then paid for it.
Yeah, you had to advocate for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, as we begin to wrap up our conversation today, John, what has been your favorite thing about supporting the other grad team as our director of the other grad team?
I think it's just been going back to which I'm trying to remember if I was talking to Amanda. I know I kind of mentioned at the beginning here, but just it's I get so many profiles. I had to almost change my thinking, especially when I was starting as like just a program manager, and now my role on the director side now I can have more room to move around. And Tom has been great with being efficient managing inbox stuff because there was a point where I was like, had to change my thinking because I was like, why? I was like, why are you asking these questions? Like, why you want to do this degree here? Like, that's not gonna work. And there's two sides to it. The one side is like, back when I was in their shoes, I didn't know what I was doing either. And it's like, so I had to be like, bring myself back to when I was a transitioning vet and when I was trying to figure out what all this new world was. But then on the flip side is like I get some profiles that you could be like that'll never work and then it works. Or like I said, you have especially some of my favorites are the like lower enlisted guys that are yeah doing PhD or going to medical school or going to law school. Like it's big thing I've learned from other experiences and like service school reinforced it is like it's all mindset. Like yeah, you're coming into a new different situation, but like I said, a lot of these vets have great intangibles. You just need to learn the language for whatever school you're looking at, whatever major, job, career. Like it's just getting out of the mindset of like, oh, I can't do that. I was a mechanic in the army. And it's like, but like maybe you don't know how to speak a certain language at the company you're looking at, but that's why service school really is here because it's made up of veteran ambassadors that were on that same route. I mean, I was on that same route, and now it's weird to see how things go full circle.
Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing your insights, your information, everything, your background. And we look forward to have veterans join us for the other grad team and all of the support that you continue to give them. And good luck with your PhD adventures.
That's all we have for this episode. Join us next week, same time, same place, where we share more service to school stories. Service to School Stories is hosted by Sydney Mathis, Chief Program Officer, and Alec Emmert, Service to School CEO. Our podcast is produced and edited by our Director of Communication, Amanda Tobias. Service to School is a 501c3 nonprofit providing free college admission support to transitioning service members and veterans. Join us next week and follow us for more on your favorite social media platforms.
Yeah, that's trying to balance a lot, but like I said, it's all aligned because I kind of found my true whatever post-military purpose, and it has helped to align things together. Service school is one of that, and I forgot my other thought, but oh yeah, it's other grad because yeah, we're handling all the other graduate degrees. So if you're looking at a master's and you're like, oh, service school doesn't cover that, we probably have at least one person that I can email, and they've been waiting for someone to do a master's of, I don't know, I can't think of something like right now, but they want to mentor someone. So it's not just MBA, law school, medical school. We can find you help for whatever you think your post-military pathway is. Thank you.